Back we go. So I'm just going to just a little background on the Clean Energy Communities Program. The state New Garrity territory comprises all these counties: North Country, Mohawk, Middle Region, and Mid-Hudson, Mohawk Valley. And the Clean Energy Community Program has been in place for some 2 years now. An open enrollment program that provides rewards and recognition to communities that can demonstrate clean energy leadership. The first step is becoming a clean energy community, of course. And as I mentioned with Amy Pokorny, that means demonstrating completion of 4 out of 10 high-impact actions with assistance from several experts, including Fauci, who we'll hear from in a moment. Step 2 is that municipalities can receive funding for project implementation. So at the present time, there's access to up to $35,000 of funding with no cost share. It's really a program for all communities. Technical assistance is available at no cost. High impact actions present options that reduce energy consumption, save money, and increase local economic development. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what's going on the ground right now?
Sure. Jill Felchey here. I just wanted to talk about the grants that are still available in the Capital District as well as across New York State. We were fortunate enough to use up our 18 original grants. We actually have 22 designated clean energy communities in the Capital District. We also have an additional source of money, which looks about $30,000 from the Lafarge settlement, and that is available to communities in Columbia, Greene, Rensselaer, and Albany counties. There's 10 to 14 of those available. There's also a new Block 3 grant provided by NYSERDA. That's $5,000, and that's available to communities across New York State where other grants have already been used up. So here in the Capital District, because we are a lot of those original grants, you can either get $1,000 depending on which county you're in, or $35,000.
Okay. So the 10 high-impact actions are here on the screen. We'll send them to you. Many of you are already very familiar with them, so I'm not going to reel them all off. But we do encourage you to engage with this program if you haven't as yet, and Jill is a tremendous resource in our region, so please do reach out to her. Okay, the technical assistance for the program includes toolkits for each high-impact action and additional funding or financing options that can help with implementation of high-impact actions. What kind of projects can be funded? Oh, sorry, here we just lost our... the criteria includes asking whether the proposer presents a thorough, sound, detailed approach to accomplishing the objectives within a reasonable time frame. Does the initiative have a positive direct impact on energy use and or greenhouse gas emissions? Will efforts be made to collaborate with other municipalities and transfer knowledge to a broader region? And does the project or initiative involve an innovative or replicable approach? That's very important. Does the project leverage public and private dollars to generate economic development? And after 2 years of the program, we've seen a lot of great projects come through that meet all those criteria, but we are still looking for communities to come into the program. So one thing we asked a lot is how clean energy communities and climate smart communities are related. So this chart, which we'll pass on to you, certainly does that. Climate Smart is a comprehensive climate program. It has 138 unique actions. You accumulate points towards certification. Clean Energy Communities is focused exclusively on the energy side. There are the 10 actions that I've described, and you complete 4 actions to be designated into as the grants. So they certainly do correspond to one another. In fact, CEC high-impact actions include Smart Community certification. More information on these programs as the list here, and again, you'll have those right in your email, so you can reach out to Jill Falchi at her CDRPC address there. And if you have any program questions, Todd Fabozzi is easy to reach as well, right here in the Albany office. We'll be hearing from Becky. Yeah, come on right in here. And to advance the slides, you're just going to go like that. And I can certainly do it with you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Becky Meier with Community Advocates for Sustainable Energy. Some of this may be elementary for some of you, but I'm an elementary school teacher. Whenever I want to go learn about something new, I get a kid's book about it, because that's a good basic explanation before you get into all the technical stuff. So here it is. I'm not saying you're elementary school kids, but just it's a good place to start. Community solar enables everyone with an electric bill to go solar.
Oh, it's just the camera went off for some reason.
Oh, but you're fine. Okay. So I'm sure all of you on programs know the benefits of solar. Most importantly, reducing pollution and global warming, adds clean energy to the grid. You lock in your electric rates. You reduce or eliminate your monthly electric bills, and it's less expensive than fossil fuels. Community solar farms are known by lots of different names. Solar farms, solar gardens, solar power plants, or community solar arrays. They're all the same thing. They're all off-site arrays. They're not on the property of the person who is buying the energy. It allows customers to purchase panels or to lease them and get clean energy without having the panels on their own properties. And they receive many of the same benefits as on-site solar. So the reason I recently went to a community solar farm is my home doesn't have enough solar exposure to make sense. And I thought that I was doomed and there was no way, so I was thrilled to hear that there was another option. Some people just don't like the aesthetics of having panels on or near their home. And although pay a maintenance fee for maintenance of your solar panels, you don't personally have to deal with them at your own site. So how does it work? So a company builds a large farm with many, many solar panels. Usually do it in a spot that's really good for exposure. I mean, they always do it in a spot that's good for solar exposure. And individuals buy the number of panels that they want to buy. And all that energy goes into the grid. And if you buy 1/100th of that solar farm, you are credited with 1/100th of the power that those panels produce. And that is compensated on your electric bill. You are credited with the power that those panels produce your electric bill. So those panels don't go directly to your house, but they offset all the solar energy that goes into the grid, means that less fossil fuel energy it replaces the fossil fuel energy. Get the credit for it. So again, it just shows you a solar farm that's no trees, nothing in the way, lots of. There are two basic membership types for farms. A plan has little or no upfront outlay. So you pay as you go. So you pay monthly. There are different terms, but usually you pay between 5 and 20% less than you would have paid previously. If you purchase them, you own panels that are at the community farm, and there are financing options available, and there are potentially greater savings over time. and you're eligible for the tax credit. So buying the panels, it's usually the most cost-effective in the long run. Your costs are 100% predictable. There will be no cost increases except the base monthly fee, which we'll go through later. Individual can take advantage of state and federal tax incentives, of which they're great. It is. The advantages of the power purchase agreement or the lease agreement, there's no upfront cost. The savings vary from 5 to 25% on monthly bills, locked-in choice, and take advantage of the tax incentives. This is sometimes a better choice. Solar farms are created for specific electricity load zones. So you have to find a community solar farm that serves your load zone. And there are many maps that you can look at that will show you New York with a map and what the load zones are. Just reflect on your bill. I'm amazed in talking to the solar industry. I don't know how they do it. The rules change. It's very hard to keep track of. So again, this is a elementary explanation. Apparently it was previously net metering, and now there's some new formula, and it's very complicated. But basically, if you use the same amount of energy that your panels produce, you'll pay your utility only the basic monthly charge. I know for an individual, in my case, it's about $17. I don't know what it is for municipalities. Monthly utility charge covers having a meter at your home or business, allows for net or remote net metering, and for allowing you access to the grid. Less energy than your panels produce, which you would presumably do in the summer, utility, the basic monthly charge, and you receive a credit for every kilowatt hour that your panels produce in excess of what you used. And use them in winter. So if you use more energy than your panels produce, which you usually do in the winter, you pay your utility the basic monthly charge. And then you pay for the delivery and supply costs for the difference between what your panels produce and what you use. But hopefully you can use your previously received credits in the summer to cover this. So I get where this came from, and I should find the source. But a great slide, they say solar ownership, low risk, high return, that it's a better financial return than treasury bills, bonds, or even large stocks. I guess we'd all be in small stocks according to this chart. But anyway, people think of it as a risky thing, but really it's not at this point. So for municipalities, there are currently many municipalities that use solar energy in a variety of different ways. They usually start by executing a RFP, request for proposal, or an RFQ, request for quote, for their specific needs are. They can build their own solar installations, which in the long run is the most cost-effective but takes upfront money. They can get involved with community choice aggregation, which I hope will be another webinar at another time. They can get involved with remote net metering or power purchase agreement with an existing community solar farm. There are lots of different options. Some resources that I found that were really interesting. I went to this NYSERDA site that showed you maps of where all the community solar farms were in any specific area. So you could put your code in and you would find the community solar farms near you. And when you hover over each sun, it gives you information about that. There's another data sheet. It lists all the community solar farms in New York State, and I just took out some of the ones in Albany. And it will give you what kind, what sector, whether it's residential, non-residential, commercial, program type. It will tell you when the project was received, completed, the status, who the contractor was, what the cost was, and what the expected kilowatt-hour annual production is. There were 940 entries for Albany, 86,430 entries for the entire state of New York. So that blew me away. There's a lot going on out there. Obviously, some of them are small. So on here are some resources that get a few of them are commercial advertisements, and I'm not endorsing that particular organization, but they gave good information about the topic of how municipalities can use community solar. So thanks, and I hope that's helpful to you.
Oh, Vicki, that was a great overview. Thank you so much. All right. So it'll be great to have those resources to our listeners. We're going to go now to Stephanie, Genesee. Stephanie, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just say next when you want me to move the slides.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Genesee. I'm an associate engineer in the electric distribution planning department at Central Hudson. One of the primary responsibilities is to handle interconnection applications, DG generation projects. And I'm going to go over Central Hudson's hosting capacity map. Next, please. Quick overview of Central Hudson. We are the electric and gas utility covering the Mid-Hudson Valley area. We're about an hour and a half south of Albany, hour and a half north of New York City, and then east and west of the Hudson River. We have 300,000 electric customers and then 75,000 gas customers. Next, please. Continued to see exponential growth over the last couple of years, primarily solar PV applications. And so at the end of March of this year, we have a little over almost 8,000, 7,900 systems that are currently installed, connecting and operating, which accounts for about 76 megawatts. And we have another 310 systems that are not currently installed yet. We have their applications, but they're not actually operating, which accounts for 130 megawatts. So we've really seen the biggest interest we had seen was distributed generation really was the solar being put on houses, the residential market. But next, please. We saw a huge increase in large standalone solar distributed generation. So this is putting large solar systems in fields. And two different types. There's the remote net meter type, and there's community distributed generation, CDG, which is the same thing, community solar. And so the only difference really between them is for remote metered, it's the same utility customer. You can have multiple accounts and transfer the credits from that generation to the different accounts. For CD community solar, it could be any customer in the utility's territory. So we have these applications over the last year or two, and we have our largest system currently installed and operating is a remote net meter project. It's a 0.584 megawatt system, but we have another 12 approved for construction. And for CDG community solar, the largest one currently installed and operating, it's only 166.5 kW, but we do have 30 that are in the 1 to 2 megawatt range that are approved for construction. So we'll start to see them come online soon and operating. I wanted to note that, so I mean, it's the first step that used to be. There's been some orders since and some updates to standardized interconnection requirements that the New York State Public Service Commission mandates. But really initially, the very first part of the process to submit an application was just to get your application submitted and get a spot in what we call the queue. Because any projects that come after you then essentially have to take into account your project. And so, upgrades could be more significant. So really we saw, as soon as community solar was initiated, we saw a huge influx of applications to the point of where we actually reached a peak of 774 megawatts in February of last year. And so to get an idea of what the impact that would be is our system peak overall for our entire territory is only a little over 1,000 megawatts. So that's a substantial amount of solar. I said, there was some order that came about to kind of move those projects forwards, ones that weren't feasible, kind of get them out if they weren't going to move forward. But next slide, please. To do hosting capacity. We're to do hosting capacity and really see this as not doing an application as the first step, but really actually looking at this hosting capacity map as the first step, as a tool to guide PV deployment. So we were ordered from the New York State Public Service Commission to come up with hosting capacity maps. When I say we, I mean the New York utilities. And so the New York utilities worked together with the Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI, to come up with a roadmap and a methodology for how we were actually going to go about and do hosting capacity. So the document we created is a public document. It's called Defining a Roadmap for Successful Implementation of Hosting Capacity Method for New York State. And really what we tried to get into with that document is first come up with definition, what actually is hosting capacity. Next, come up with how we were actually going to go about and compute hosting capacity. So EPRI actually at the time really had one of the only tools that computed hosting capacity. It's called the Online Hosting Capacity Method tool, and so we decided that was a good approach to go about. Also take into account, what system impacts are we going to consider as part of this hosting capacity analysis, and then the map display. How is this all actually going to look? Next slide, please. So first, the definition. What is hosting capacity? So hosting capacity is, we define this as an estimate of the amount of distributed energy resources that may be accommodated without adversely impacting power quality or reliability under current configurations and without requiring infrastructure upgrades. So essentially what it means is, B and D in general can have power quality impacts, may have power quality impacts depending on their size. They cause voltage issues or maybe it could be thermal issues as well. So what is the amount of DG, PV that we could host on our circuits as is today without requiring any sort of significant infrastructure upgrades? Next slide, please. Part of the public document I mentioned, we came up with a roadmap, and I'm going to get into each of these stages in detail in a second. But essentially, start from stage 1 or go to stage 4. It definitely becomes more of a complex process. There's more that's required, but overall, we do see the value, it being more valuable to get to the more in-depth stage 4 process, which I'll discuss in a second. Next slide, please. And we called the distribution indicator map. This was already completed, and this really was what we created and provided to give system data while we were working on actually creating hosting capacity. So it wasn't hosting capacity at the time. It was really highlighting circuits that we believed would have high infrastructure upgrades due to being low voltage or single phase, as well as that large U impact that I mentioned earlier, just highlighting where we were seeing a lot of DG being proposed. But once that was eventually replaced by stage 2 then, which is actually hosting capacity, and it was actually completed as well. It was completed on October 1st of last year. We were ordered to do it for level hosting capacity for 12 kV circuits and above, and we get based on a 3-phase mainline level. We are updating those hosting capacity values on an annual basis. And we also just recently, in April, came up with really the hosting capacity was a feeder level, and it only gave feeder information. But we had some stakeholder engagement meetings and determined it would be valuable to provide some substation information as well. So we provided that. We created an update back in April. Next slide. So how can you use the map for hosting capacity? If you look at the picture on the right, you'll see the outline of our territory and all the different colors. And really what that represents is it's all the circuits in our territory, and they're highlighted by the max hosting capacity value. There's a legend below. This is all, I know this is probably hard to see in detail, but this is all listed in the map itself. And so we highlight by the max hosting capacity value, and or if there's no hosting capacity value, that's the pinkish grayish color. And so then the picture in the center of how you can actually use it, we use an Esri GIS-based map. It's really similar to what you would look at and search for when you're using like a Google Maps. So you have a specific address or location that you're interested in, you can search that address and go to it. I'm getting pretty zoomed out, but you can zoom in into detail into the specific location you're looking for. And once you actually find the location, you can click on the actual circuit that's like right along the property that you're interested in. And then when you click on it, a little pop-up box will come up as I show in that picture right there. And what it provides is first the substation name. So in this example, I know it's hard to read, but this example, it's our Westerlo substation. It provides the circuit name, so that's the 1092. It provides the voltage information, so it's a 13-kV circuit, and which is why it has hosting capacity values. And then it provides the max and the min hosting capacity values, as well as some DG information. So for this example, the hosting capacity value is 2.2 megawatts, and then 0.1 megawatts. And what that actually means is that for this value, it means somewhere on that three-phase main line for the specific circuit that the property is located on, we could handle 2.2 megawatts without requiring significant upgrades. What the value means is really anywhere on that three-phase main line be able to handle 0.1 megawatts. And that really is rule of thumb that we've seen is the closer you are to a utility substation, usually the higher hosting capacity you have, the further out you go, typically the lower it gets due to circuit characteristics. So below the max and the min, stage 2 didn't include the existing DG. It was really more of just a baseline of, okay, what could our circuits host before any sort of PV or DG on it. We do realize that the queue can have a big impact, as I mentioned. Applications that come after do have to consider those that are ahead. So we do provide the DG information and update it on a monthly basis. In this example, in this case, the DG that's actually interconnected is about 0.48 megawatts, and the DG that's in queue is almost 10 megawatts. It's 9.95. So really what you would do is kind of look at this and say, okay, although there's the potential to be able to host, a 2.2 megawatt system, there's a significant amount of DG in queue. For Central Hudson, a lot of our circuits are really designed for 6 megawatts. So when you start seeing applications above that, you're really probably looking at some more infrastructure upgrades. So for someone that's using this map, they could say, okay, well, maybe at this point in time, it's not maybe feasible to move forward. And then for the substation enhancements, I didn't put a picture of it, but essentially, if there's a little arrow that you click on, and it's very similar to what this looks right here, it just shows the queue information for the substation. I listed the Hudson's map address to get to our map, as well as the New York Utilities website, Joint Utilities of New York website, because although I'm describing Central Hudson specifically, really all the New York State utilities work together to standardize this process, from not only, the legends and the colors and the display, to all of the inputs that went into it. So really you can get to any of the other New York Utilities websites from that JU link I listed as well, and look at all their different ones as well. Next slide. Future stages. Stage 3, we're currently in the preliminary planning stage on that, and what we're looking to do for that is we're calling it advanced hosting capacity. So we're going to be able to, right now we're just providing, 1 or 2 values, a min and a max for the feeder level, but we want to maybe look to see if there's benefit into providing a more nodal or granular level. So, just the overall feeder, what can it handle, what can maybe specific locations on that feeder then handle for hosting capacity. We also want to take into account operation flexibility. So for reliability purposes, we typically have automatic load transfer schemes that will have the circuits operating in different configurations, and that alters the entire hosting capacity for proposed PV systems. So we will see if we can take that into account for hosting capacity, as well as substation and transmission constraints. Right now it's just field level, but as you start to see more and more of these systems come on, eventually it's going to come in aggregate and affect the substation as well as the transmission, because there are a lot of large 20 to 30 megawatt systems that we're seeing interest for PV on the NISO level. So we want to take basically a system-wide constraints into account as well. So that's still in the planning stages. Stage 4 we haven't started since we're just in stage 3. What that gets into, though, is really hosting capacity integrated with the value of DER. So looking at, what's the hosting capacity, along with if there's a specific location that PV or DG could provide value, maybe it's voltage support or capacity support. That's much further out, and that would be stage 4 of it. Next slide. Thank you all for listening, and I think we'll be taking questions at the end.
Definitely, that was terrific. All right, our next speaker, Amy, will be right up here.
I can sit right here.
Yeah. All right, let me just turn this.
Okay, hi, my name is Amy Pokorny. I'm a member of Helderberg Community Energy, which is a group of citizen advocates for renewable energy. We're a collection of interested neighbors and friends who partnered with Solarize Albany and Monolith Solar to launch a community solar array. My presentation today will describe how community solar can be developed without direct involvement from the municipality. To get started, as a group of loosely affiliated individuals, we had to start by setting up a legal entity. We use Helderberg Community Energy LLC as our name, or HCE for short. The mission statement, which quickly is to develop and support locally owned renewable energy projects which address climate change and strengthen our rural economy, and laws to define our organizational structure in terms of membership, role of officers, and how our decisions are made. The bank account with dues we collected from our membership. This plan to develop, to define and help us focus on our goals, and to a description of who we are and what we hope to achieve. We developed a glossary of terms and acronyms to educate ourselves and others so we could more effectively communicate with the public and the other players we would volunteer to work with and encounter along the way. And these templates are available for other startup groups if they can be put to good use that way. Activities that we have engaged in, other momentum, primarily have involved communication. We developed a logo, a brochure, that people talking so our members could deliver a consistent message. We've reached to interested friends and neighbors for their support, citing their expertise in related areas, have held scheduled meetings to keep us on task, and we've distributed minutes to document our progress over time. We with Solarize Albany to benefit from their support and expertise network, and started a public outreach and marketing campaign to cultivate interest and recruit potential customers. We have informational meetings. We set up tables to distribute brochures and in our efforts and answer questions at public gatherings, for example, Earth Day, the Tulip Festival, the Altamont Fair, green and recycling events, and farmers markets, and more. Along the way, we collected names and contact information from people who expressed an interest in joining a community solar array if this were attractive to them. We're working to build public support. We made use of several valuable and really indispensable resources from NYSERDA. NYSERDA provides tools and guidance to prepare an RFP, which is, he said, is a request for proposals, for a community solar project that will provide bulk purchase benefits for our customers, similar to the Solarize model that's so effective in helping people at rooftop solar installations at competitive prices. NYSERDA's guidance and expertise to review and evaluate the proposals that we received from vendors according to accepted and proven fair competitive bidding process. Thus, understand and discriminate among the terms that the different vendors offered. Thus, sort pricing offers to compare and calculate long-term costs and savings projections, and had up-to-date information on industry standards for hardware offerings
to help identify the pros and cons and to weigh the value of each proposal so we could make an informed and defensible selection among others who submitted bids. This effort, the role and responsibilities of our partners have separated into several different kinds of activities. AE and Solarize work together to partner and recruit customers. We hold outreach activities and events to raise public awareness about the financial and ecological benefits of solar energy. Printed materials, and we place long signs in high visibility areas in our communities. Solarize Albany's website support and screening utility that helps individuals determine whether their best option is either a rooftop or backyard solar installation, or a community solar array with opportunities to either buy panels or to subscribe to a power purchase agreement. Our selected vendor, which is Monolith Solar, this land, will raise and also arranges for permitting and utility interconnection agreements. And they track directly with the customers that we refer to them or any customers they recruit on their own. Other solar vendor options are also available, and you can find them on the Solarize Albany website. Healthy Energy works with local officials to facilitate the adoption of renewable energy by updating town policies, zone and permitting processes. And we all work with them by staying informed about new opportunities that can benefit our citizens and our environment, and communicating with them about that information as it comes along. Ongoing work of HE continues primarily as outreach and marketing, always depend upon effective communications with the public, local officials, governmental support agencies, and solar industry representatives. The next screen has our contact information, and we welcome anyone who will join with us in continuing with the work that lies ahead. And any questions we can take at the end. Thank you.
Oh, Amy, thank you so much. It was great. Come on over. Rob G's going to join us next from Borrego Solar. An obstacle course.
Okay, get in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, we're not going to switch computers.
No, okay.
Yeah, you're
Just
right.
have my notes here.
Oh, I see. Sure. Okay, here. So they can see you better.
Okay.
And put that there.
Good afternoon, everyone. I guess it's a little premature. Good morning. Talk to you, Pat, about what would be potentially beneficial here in a discussion with regards to community solar development. Coming from a development perspective, in that most of the time, planning boards, town boards, boards see these projects after they're through a number of stages of development. It would be helpful to step back from specific policy issues or interconnection issues and really talk about what it looks like in a more macro perspective. How do we advance the slides? Right here. I'm getting control. Okay, so actually step through the process of developing projects, looking at projects. Community solar, typically they're 2 megawatts AC to 5 megawatts AC, sometimes stacked. They look at it from the very first step of saying, okay, projects in New York State, what are the utility regions, what are the tariff values, what are the different radiance levels, all the way there saying, okay, where in the state do we want to develop projects through initial operation? development with Borrego Solar, and we do see in projects, commercial industrial projects. So they're individual residential projects. They're not individual commercial projects that are smaller. It's in New York State that you'd have large projects of this scale for single off-takers, like SUNY Poly. We built a number of projects for SUNY Poly, and they're dedicated. Each project is dedicated to a single off-taker. Or you'd have a larger project that was behind the meter, of the same scale as these larger projects we're building now, but because the tariffs have changed, namely moving from monetary metering to volumetric net metering, and that's one tariff, because residential tariffs are that higher than commercial offtake. Pretty much all projects in the C&I sector in New York are community solar projects. So this focuses on C&I, the distribution level, it's all community solar essentially. We're not projects right now that are whole scale LR projects. We're to see some of those come online as more mature projects moving through permitting and interaction. None of those have been built in New York State yet to kind of qualify what we're on C&I and CDG projects. So just one more thing. So this is a picture of 2 megawatt AC projects. It's 11 acres, 2.8 watts DC. Because of public service law 66A, the maximum that we've been allowed to build in New York State up until very recently has been 2 megawatts AC per interconnection, to 5 megawatts AC connection, and heard in 2 presentations previously. Often distribution capacity doesn't allow for to build a project that's 5 megawatts AC, but we are building those where we can, and we're building up to the threshold of the distribution capacity as one limitation on system size, and what about the other things influence how we actually get to particular system sizes as we go forward here in the presentation. So if we have 6 steps, just quickly trying to break down development and talk about how we're moving forward with projects. If we have 6 steps here, the first 2 would be service territories, saying, okay, given irradiance levels, given tariff levels, given the megawatt block, where that is, given our bill cost, interconnection costs included in there, where can we build projects then to actually provide a value to off-takers and meet business requirements for our return on our materials. So obviously, you don't see a uniform amount of activity across the state, right, between National Grid and NYSEG. See, for example, there's a great disparity in tariff values. There's also difference in irradiance levels, but it's really about the tariff. For example, in the Orange and Rockland, Central Hudson, a lot more activity down there compared to other of the state. And little activity there, and we stay out of Con Ed just because there's not a lot of areas, not a lot of land on there to be developed projects generally. The first step, right, finding where you can actually build projects that make sense, where they're going to pencil. Good level of granularity further. When you look, okay, here's the first territory I want to focus on. Then start to look at substations and looking at the central presentation. It's about where's capacity. So this is going to basically reduce you down from maybe 10% of the land that's you were looking at in the first step. Now you're looking at in the second step, where there's actually distribution capacity available, and you go into further where there are landowners that are interested, and you can actually get site control and take forward from there. When we cite that is of interest, we have donor interest and they want to move forward, given our typically lease rates and what we propose as far as the use and where we want to be building on the property and wetlands and other things. forward to a further level of qualification. 1 in 100 sites are going to make it through this desktop qualification process. And again, this is before to a town for doing permitting. So my point here is that many people in the audience are seeing these projects before planning boards or town boards talking about or moratoriums, bylaws. So this presentation is about, okay, how does development work from a different standpoint, and what kinds of things are already checked out, what is contemplated when you walk into a planning board, for example. Qualification, we are looking at the existing bylaws for allowed uses in towns, where their property tax situation between the different taxing jurisdictions and how that is out with Real Property Tax Law 47 that provides an exemption for solar projects in the state. We entered into an action process. There's a lot of different steps there, including projects, specific projects for interconnection. We're looking at full acreage on the site, thinking about topography, thinking about wetlands, thinking about endangered species, archaeo, so concerns. So fourth step is just another layer of due diligence. This is where we're getting quite into the interconnection process, really doing a deep dive on title issues. We have scientists going out for endangered species, archaeological surveys if necessary. All we're doing additional iterations on the system design, and more data back. It's going to be plans where we can't build. It's then in 5 that we're going to permitting, and typically we also need to subdivide parcels, just because 66J New York State Public Service Law 66J legislates how distributed generation interacts with the grid, and there's a number of different options in that law for how and what you're able to connect, how that's constructed on the property, how it's configured with metering, so on and so forth. This leads us to need to subdivide the parcel so we can build our project and be in compliance. So a town board probably first see a project, there's interacting with regards to pilots and the project as well. Then, perspective, the easier part is the actual construction, right? And these projects, we found to a general science background is in construction. Before I came to Borrego 5 years ago, I was an EPC, building large-scale projects and residential projects, small commercial. This is pretty much 4 to 8 months for a project that's between 2.5 to 5 megawatts, 7 megawatts DC. So, I'm also on the board of NICEA, and one of the things that we do at NICEA is look at various development hurdles that exist and address them. One of the major focuses we have is on interconnection policy, how relation is changing and legislating interconnection laws in New York, and how that affects interconnection of projects. From a development standpoint, this is huge, has major cost and timing implications on projects. Said, this 2 to 5 megawatts AC has been significant. That's a recent win for the industry, and there's a number of different things that we're playing on a technical perspective. We don't need to get into right now, but it's noting that there are researchers out there between ESC, DPS, and we sit on these working groups, the technical working group and policy working group, to make sure the interconnection issue rests, and there's solar industry representation there. As we have a big push on property tax right now, as I'm sure you're aware, 47 lights how property tax affects solar projects, to the extent that there is a 15-year exemption on property tax for each of the jurisdictions outside of the special districts. and there's a lot of work there because a lot of ambiguity in the way 47 was written years ago, which is understandable given where the industry was. That 47 legislates biogas, wind, and solar, and it's just not a perfect fit for solar and where the development of the industry is come into its written. So we spent time with that as well. Let's see, I think that's about it. Open nations, wait for that period.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Why don't you stay around here? And
Okay,
so in
I'm here.
case we have some questions, let me just check. I have some questions for you, sure. Let's just see. Okay. So team, do you have questions for each other? And could you maybe come over here so we could have kind of a conversation? I'd like to kick it off. So, Rob, you know, I have to be careful. It's a minefield. I had initially told you that a lot of the folks on the webinar today would be municipal officials.
Right,
And so
right.
you're not finding any traction for bigger projects with municipal partners, per se.
So I talked to you before with monetary metering, where you had projects that were really dedicated to specific off-takers, like SUNY Poly, or we built projects for the resorts where you have an off-taker. That sense, because the town was benefiting as an off-taker. Because residential rates are so much higher now, almost the activity in the C&I sector is for community solar projects.
Mm-hmm.
The opportunity for municipalities to get involved directly with projects is more limited to maybe leasing their land rather than being an off-taker for projects. I have seen some projects out there where there's a carve-out for the municipality resident takers, in those projects, but it's a little bit different than the involvement we saw before.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong. I spoke to some of our local developers, and they said that they had many municipal contracts. So I don't know if it's different further south than it is in the Albany area.
Yeah, crossed over from those days when there were monetary metering tariffs, and you could get in and have sectors and be underneath that tariff. We just don't see a lot of it anymore.
Can you do when you talk about tariffs?
Yeah.
She's further
Okay.
away.
To find the word tariff, as I'm using it here, it's really just what service class you're in, or your residential service class. Every every utility has different service classes, and that is legislated by the PSC, and what those rates are various service class. So, commercial off-taker, non-demand, is a much higher rate typically than a demand-based commercial off-taker. And there's been different changes with the tariffs and how DG has been legislated by the PSC. Distributed generation and solar projects have been legislated by the PSC. You've seen really very different than for these projects because the tariffs have been changing. And more detail on that we can talk about. I'm not sure how interesting it is for.
Well, we do have a question from our friend Chris Carrick. Hi, Chris. The way. And Chris is asking Rob, can you please mention the VDARE fix bill in the legislature? It's Assembly Bill 10474, Senate Bill 8273.
Sure.
Chris's organization, Senate Regional Planning and Development Board, is pushing for this. It will be key to making Central New York solarized portfolio and many other upstate community solar projects work.
There's definitely been a lot of pain with Phase 1 VDARE and not having a lot of view of where Phase 2 is going to pan out. So this bill's definitely interesting, making again NEM volumetric metering like it was the regime that we saw before Phase 1, between monetary metering and Phase 1 tariffs. much higher. It's a generally much higher rate structure. So the compensation's higher for every kilowatt produced solar projects.
So NYSEA is actively lobbying for this? Yeah. And what are the prospects?
We'll see.
We'll see.
New? It's a very new bill.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, there's been interest. The PSC and the governor's office, they're doing great work on phase 1 and phase 2, and we're trying to all get there. It's a conversation, so it's interesting.
When you say higher compensation, from who to who?
It's actually the itself. The rate per kilowatt hour is higher, typically for net metering, instead of the phase 1 base stack. Yeah. So under there's been this initiative to come up with a new tariff that says it's going to compensate these distributed generation resources, and it's a much more complex. There's a lot more nuance involved, but it leaves the old tariff behind. The old tariff essentially was every kilowatt produced, metric metering, I'm going to get the purchase of that kilowatt hour. So whatever, if you're on, if it's residential, and you're buying power for 11 cents per kilowatt hour, every kilowatt hour from your solar system, you're not 11 cents, power from your residential supplier, if that's NYSEG or Grid, whoever that is. If you're a small commercial, non-customer, maybe those 9 cents per kilowatt hour you're buying. So your tariff is different. Your credit value then is different because you're not buying at 9 cents per kilowatt hour. And then end customer, it's like 5 per kilowatt hour maybe. Those proportions like 12 to 5 are real. A lot of the utilities, it's that much of a difference. So you see difference in net meter, whereas the back for commercial and residential, it's different net metering, and it's oftentimes lower. Not oftentimes lower.
We had a whole bunch of questions come in, but let's go to Amy.
I was going to ask Rob if you see the prices coming down in the next few years significantly. Is there any reason for municipalities or for customers to wait, or is this a good time to get?
And asking about the price for installed solar come down, or the offering of per kilowatt hour for community projects? The offering of the question was, will the costs be coming down because the cost of solar projects are coming down in the future? A lot of moving parts. The megawatt block award, the value per kilowatt hour produced. This is something that we're from phase 1 to phase 2. So the compensation rate will change. It's difficult to say. All I do know is that every time I've hesitated in solar, and I've been doing this since 2001, it's always worse, basically. In the sense of, like, if you now, there's typically a lot of things in place, and, everybody wants to move towards less incentives and really have the industry go off its own, without. And so I think that typically if it makes sense now and you get in and you know what you're going to be saving for 20, 25 years, you've looked at your economic analysis and you think it makes sense right now, well, okay, it's going to make sense now and you're going to have this for a long time. And who's to say? But there's a lot of moving parts, and that's certainly the trend I've seen in the past. It has gotten a lot better as time has gone on.
Okay, a whole slew of questions. We don't know the authors' names, but here we go. So the best person should answer. Is community solar viable where the supply of power is under 6 cents per kilowatt hour, and delivery and meter costs are fixed and not based on kilowatt hour?
Sure. Okay. I mean, you have to have more particulars here to be able to answer that question. What value stack? So what's the credit you're going to be getting per kilowatt hour produced? I think that part of it may be premised on the idea that this is NEM, it's volumetric NEM, in the sense of you're going to get credit, you're going to offset what your purchase is. Well, that's not the way phase 1 views anymore. it's at a monetary credit. It's going onto your bill. So there's more to look at than.
Yes.
You also don't know that 6 cents per kilowatt hour is going to stay stable. I mean, the experience is that price has gone up with time on down, whereas if you buy the solar panel, that cost is constant.
Right. Okay, here's a provocative question from someone who remain nameless. Are municipalities legislating solar based on the amount of agriculture being taken out of production? Anybody want to? Okay. Well, I think let's try to reframe it. So does anyone know if any municipalities have taken to legislating for solar based on the amount of agriculture being taken out of production? I imagine are they trying to balance those competing interests?
There are concerns by municipalities about solar arrays taking over solar agricultural land.
Right.
But there's also the possibility that farmers can't stay on their land. So if they were to lease or sell part of their property for a solar array, they could keep farming. And I think there are both sides. I've often heard that early on in this, there were some unscrupulous developers who put land out of commission and leased them and then never built their farms. And these farmers are now in limbo. So it sounds there were some past practices that have left some taste in people's mouths. I think there are ways to coexist, and I've even seen farms in Europe where you can plant things and animals below the solar panel so that they can coexist. So I think you can be imaginative, and I don't think there's a one, but there is concern, and I think that the solar industry needs to address this concern by municipalities.
Can I just say one thing on that?
Please.
I've been in front of other plant boards where they are concerned about how much agricultural land is going to be consumed solar. Something that's somewhat difficult to define how much of the land base will be, consumed by solar. I think that you need to look at your comprehensive plan. As a home state, I've seen a number of different bylaws that are really cognizant of what they find as prime ag land, and that really needs to be looked at. It's easy for people to say, okay, that's prime ag land, you shouldn't be putting solar there, but there's with corn, there's just in our state to really help quantify what is valuable land, what's most valuable, and what's our long-term plan for it. Putting solar on land doesn't mean that after the solar is there, you can't use it for ag anymore. After talking about dual use, there are things you can do while solar is in place to build soils. You can do sheep load, and there's other things that are possible. Some of these projects don't tolerate anything aside for a very straightforward project, and that's real. Then municipalities will be out any benefit would be getting from having solar in their municipality. There's a lot to consider there, and it's not a simple question, as far as what's the net impact on ag land overall. But I did the answer that there's definitely municipalities out there that are legislating based on the agricultural impact.
So we have some kind of long questions here, but I'm going to go back to our friend Chris Clark. Stephanie, are you still with us?
Here.
Okay. So from our friends in Western New York, or Central New York, excuse me, according to the NYSERDA data, over 12% of all community solar projects are in Central Hudson Territory, and over 33% are in the Hudson Valley. Isn't this a problem, given the limits on hosting capacity, high-quality agricultural land? And then he inserts an editorial viewpoint. We can't wait for VDR Phase 2. So any thoughts on that, Stephanie?
We're working currently on R&D projects. Smart inverters and battery storage kind of as maybe next stage be incorporated with PV to increase hosting capacity. Right now we have an R&D project where we're testing some smart inverter functions because, you know, they ultimately, if there are infrastructure upgrades that are a high cost, you know, the use of smart inverters can help mitigate those issues and then not have as high of a cost for upgrades and therefore increase hosting capacity. As well as we're starting to see some battery storage. I mean, I know battery storage isn't necessarily cheap, but combining that with PV, it can definitely help increase the amount that can be put onto our system. We're also working towards coming, we have a distribution management system that we're just putting in place, and so actually at some point the idea is to be able to kind of, whether it's autonomous or direct control, I mean, this is really far out there, but, you know, we're working towards trying to be able to maybe control these types of devices to be able to get more, I guess, DG or PV on the system. I mean, it's a little far out, but there are some efforts out there to try to improve hosting capacity.
Can you define that word VG?
VDER.
What is VDER?
Okay, sure. The value of distributed energy resources. This is the route process to say, okay, these resources, you know, that are distributed generation in the sense that they're putting kilowatt hours onto the grid in a decentralized fashion. How do we actually compensate for those, given the environmental, given the social, given grid support services that these projects provide? Instead of just being, okay, every kilowatt hour produced, you offset your purchase of kilowatt hour on your tariff. Saying these are your plants, and how do we compensate them in a way that's really more representative of what they are providing to the grid?
VDER is the first time the environmental benefits were quantified or attempted. Yeah,
there was some REC value in the every class pays into the SBC. There was some value in there, but it wasn't nearly as explicit or nuanced as it's, you know, being quantified in VDER.
Right. Well, I have a question. You know, you talk about the scientists going out in the fields and looking for endangered species and all that kind of thing. What you don't have a lot of municipal partners in your projects. It's certainly many communities are trying to be solar friendly. So, what is the most important thing from the developer's point of view when you start peeling back the onion on a community to see how viable it's going to be for development? What are the top 3-4 things you're looking for in terms of solar readiness or friendliness?
Municipal standpoint, you're looking at property tax. You're looking at bylaws. You know, how limiting. You know, I've seen some bylaws that says, okay, you can only build solar of the scale if it's, say, over 10 acres. You know, you can build it in the commercial district, and that's like, you know, 5 minutes or something. Interconnect, of course, you know, looking at the distribution capacity that exists, huge floodplains, archaeo, you know, we need to site-specific constraints. There's a ton of them.
Making your property tax exemption is optional for a county, right? They don't have to go with that. And
so you're automatically in. Each section is in.
Out.
Opt out. Yeah, and it's each jurisdiction, the school, county, and the town, village, city. But
if I'm not mistaken, Montgomery County has opted out.
I don't know that offhand.
I remember.
Yeah, it's true.
And you're looking at a project in Glen, I think. There's
but
there's a
yeah.
Okay. Anything over here? Two. Oh, great. Okay. Let's see. We have to look at the time a little bit. We're good. Model. Could you own just panels or land also? Who pays the taxes? Did I get that right?
Yeah. The thing is that you only own the panels, you don't own the land, and therefore you aren't taxed on the land. The only price you pay beyond the price for the panel is a monthly service charge for maintenance, and that maybe part of that goes into tax. I don't know. Does anyone think different?
Our projects, which you said the ownership model?
Can
you expand on that?
You need to own
A solar farm.
For residents. Yes, sorry.
Residents own their
Yeah.
own projects?
So residents are part of the community solar.
Oh, okay.
They're not handled in a
Yeah.
large array.
And that's later remotely,
Yeah.
the PDG project. Yeah, there's a lot of different creative ways to this project. You know, the thing again about CDG projects that are larger scale, like the ones that are helping 2 to 5 megawatts AC. The typical setup is that you have an ID, an independent power producer that owns gas plants. They own a lot of different assets that are generating power. They own a solar project, and this is one of their assets. I mean, you also have more desks that own, you know, that is part of their investment class, and they're focused on GDG, things like that. But you have an owner that is, they're not located in the state, unfortunately, you know, things like that, and they just gonna say, okay, how many kilowatt hours produced, you're gonna give me X, you know, it's gonna be maybe a percentage of the total retail value or VDO. Instead of the residential operator owning the solar panel. It does exist. It's just not very common. In that case, you know, I don't think that they own anything aside for the actual solar project, not the land itself, but I'm not very familiar with that model, actually.
Big question over here. We often hear concerns about PVs containing toxic metals. Does this really pose a risk, for example, groundwater contamination? What can a community do to control what types of panels are being used? What about you?
Okay. Yeah, so the majority of panels out there are silicon-based, and pretty much inert. You know, it's the recycling programs that are available for panels as they end their life. That's obviously not something that this industry has seen a lot of because the past 25, 50 years. We're seeing some of this though, end of life, and there is recycling. Most of the panels out there are crystalline silicon, and there's not toxic, you know, heavy metals that are really involved with production of those, or is it an issue with like leaking, having solid state anyway? So there's not like liquid or gas that can be coming off these projects. Anyway, the things that, you know, where this came from is cadmium in the thin module. It's just not very well used. We actually don't see projects in New York that are solar and they have this ingredients and, you know, construct those modules, but very uncommon. And I'm also not saying that necessarily that's a health issue either. It needs to be looked into, but I don't install those modules, so I can't really speak to the ins and outs of that.
Right.
But I think any project you can ask the developer what panels they're using, and
Sure.
you can get specs on it, and you can make your own decision about whether those specs meet your qualifications.
As I am board.
For Becky, in what scenario would an interested party be unable to access tax incentives?
Me. If you're retired and your tax liability isn't as high as the incentive. I put in my geothermal, I was entitled to 30% of the cost, and so for the community solar, that came up to $10,000, but I don't pay taxes. I'm not liable for much taxes at this point in my life. Obviously, if you're a not-for-profit organization, you don't pay taxes, so you can't get that tax incentive. So those two that I'm aware of.
This is one too. If you're a resident and you're planning to subscribe to a community solar array, you can purchase panels and qualify for the federal tax rebate, but the state tax rebate does not apply to those situations. Although if you were buying solar to install on your roof or in your backyard, you would get a 25%, I think it's this year, for state tax rebate. So that would be just one example of a tax incentive that wouldn't qualify.
Right. Okay.
Question, I probably have to make it
Yeah, sure.
This is imagining community choice aggregations starting from materialize in places, there's conversations here and all about it. And then there's an interest in green energy being the energy source for future aggregation, and a concern that buying rec credits puts the price too high, but that working with community solar developers, there's a way to actually bring green energy into community choice aggregation. So can you talk about that a little bit? I know it's all new.
I can't talk about that because I'm really focused on site development and some of the nuances around community choice aggregation. I just don't know. I'm not sure how that plays into BDR value stack, and
And just a little, it's very new.
Sorry.
We have to repeat the question. Well, let's see, so the question is whether, community, for green energy and community choice aggregation.
And how community solar can interface with choice aggregation.
Right. Community solar can interface with community choice aggregation.
My sense is that the solar industry is actually very interested in that interface, and they think it's be a big windfall. I don't know the pricing, but community choice aggregation in total means the community opts into a bulk buying and you can write your contract any way you want. Many of us are interested in community choice aggregation contracts asking specifically for renewable energy, which would create a market for community solar farms.
So what that means is every in the municipality would be signed up for this single source of electricity unless they wanted to opt out. They'd have the choice of opting out, but they would automatically benefit from the reduced pricing from the aggregated community choice, CCA, community choice aggregation.
And there are two reasons that communities want to do this. One is simply to lower their price, and two is to create more renewable energy. And some two come in conflict with each other.
So we have to wrap up, but one final question for both of you or either of you. So, you're in the trenches on the community level. What advice would you give other communities that want to get started, but maybe they're not even out of the gates yet in terms of promoting community solar?
Just say, if you look at NYSERDA's website and look at the tools that they offer, it gives you a sense of the scope of work and the kinds of tasks that are involved, and may suggest connections that you already have in your community with people who have the skills to do the kinds of work that's involved. It's not difficult work, and it's not especially specialized either, but there's so many really helpful resources. Things are so well organized for approaching this task.
Yeah, you mentioned also, if you don't mind, close out, that not only the outreach coordinators here in the Capital District still, but that there are outreach coordinators in the community across the state.
Right.
And I sort of Clean Energy Community webpage for those contacts.
Right, so just a reminder to check the Clean Energy Communities webpage for the network of outreach coordinators around upstate Eastern New York and Western New York who can help, absolutely, for state and central. A final thought from you, Becky?
I'm sure that both Amy and I welcome anybody just calling us up and picking up for ideas, but one, find a group of people you want to work with. You can't do it alone. So find people in your community you want to work with. And organizations that are doing similar work have already made a lot of the connections. And there are a great group of people working at this, so you meet lots of wonderful people.
It's true.
Keep it up.
It's true. All right, thank you, everyone. That completes the webinar for today. You will receive the slides, and feel free to contact any of us. You'll have our contact information. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, thank you.
Were there other questions? You said there was some